Hi, I am Ryan Zell. In light of the tragic news coming out of Philadelphia, I've often asked myself, why are the tares allowed to be among the wheat in the church? This video draws on the parable of the wheat and the tares as found in Matthew 13. Matthew 13 is all about the kingdom of heaven, which is the church Jesus Christ established before he was taken up to heaven. There are 7 parables relating to the kingdom of heaven, of which Matthew 16, the keys of the heaven of Jesus, are given to Peter. Tares look exactly like wheat, and only an experienced eye can distinguish between the tares and the wheat. Tares are also known as darnel, poison darnel, darnel ryegrass, or cockle. It usually grows in the same climate zones as wheat. As we explore the parable of the wheat and the tares, we will find that there are indeed tares among the wheat in the church. We do not leave Peter because of Judas. The tares among the wheat, Matthew 13:24-30. Another parable he put before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the householder came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then has it weeds? He said to them, an enemy has done this. The servants said to him, then do you want us to go and gather them? But he said, no, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. See Matthew 13:10-17 of why Jesus talks to us in parables, and we will continue. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. He answered, he who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed means the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the close of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so it will be at the close of the age. The Son of Man will come with his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers, and throw them into the furnace of fire. There men will weep and gnash their teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. The parable of the marriage feast, which I believe is referring to the marriage feast of the Lamb, is also telling us what the church will look like before the second coming of Jesus. Matthew 22:1-14. And again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a marriage feast for his son, and sent his servants to call those who were invited to the marriage feast, but they would not come. Again he sent other servants, saying, tell those who were invited, behold, I have made ready my dinner, my oxen and my fat calves are killed, and everything is ready. Come to the marriage feast. But they made light of it and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. And the king was angry, and he sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to the servants, the wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the thoroughfares and invite to the marriage feast as many as you find. Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered together all they found, both evil and good, and the wedding hall was filled with dinner guests. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there was a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness, where men will weep and gnash their teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. Notice in verse 10 that the marriage feast will contain both the bad and the good, both the evil and the good. This is the reality of what Jesus tells us the kingdom of heaven will look like, which is his church. Since there are no sinners in heaven, the kingdom of heaven of this parable is the same kingdom of heaven of which the keys were given to the apostle Peter. Another thing to notice is that those who were invited first, the Jews, were not worthy. In the new covenant, there will be those who are not worthy, but they are still in the church because throwing them out may result in throwing out those who are or will eventually be worthy. And one more thing, the wedding garment is understood as God's grace. Those who sin lose God's grace, and that man did not have God's grace when he came to the wedding feast of the Lamb. This is a comment from Dr. Brian Cross. When I study church history, I'm still surprised at how throughout her history there have always been saints and sinners within her. Always. But where sin abounded, grace abounded all the more. The church remains holy, even when her members sin, even when it is scandalous and shameful. The eye of the man looks at the church and sees sinful men, but the eye of faith looks at the church and sees the sinful men within the holy church. If the church were merely a human institution, I wouldn't trust it any more than I trust any other merely human institution. But this thing we speak of in the Creed, this one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, is a divine institution, not only founded by the God-man, but animated by the Holy Spirit. It is a mystical continuation of his supernatural incarnate life, and that's why I trust the church, because I believe that it is Christ, his body of which he is the head. This sums it up for me. The church we call Catholic. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. God is stronger than all the human weakness in his church. Acts 20:29-30. I know that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among your own selves, men will arise, speaking perverse things to draw away the disciples after them. In Acts 20, Paul is not saying that the church will be led astray. He is speaking of those who will draw disciples away by both word and deeds. This is what we have to be careful of. Are you going to leave Peter because of Judas, or do we clean house and let God's justice prevail? In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus delivers 7 parables of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus chose Judas, knowing he was a devil. The church is filled with the good wheat and the bad tares, as Jesus himself tells us in the parable of the wedding feast in Matthew 22. Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered together all they found, both evil and good, and the wedding hall was filled with the dinner guests. The Catholic Church is a hospital for sinners. It has always been the hope of the church that sinners would become a new creation. Despite some bad soil, bad seed, and bad fish, the kingdom of heaven will produce an abundant harvest and a great catch. God bless you all.